The Grand Archive of Threxel did not sleep. It pulsed. Light moved through its vaulted chambers like thought itself, streams of data flowing between suspended crystalline lattices, each one humming with compressed knowledge gathered across millennia. Entire civilizations existed here in fragments: languages, star maps, biological records, extinct philosophies. Nothing was lost. Nothing was forgotten. Or so they believed. At the center of the primary analysis hall, a circular platform hovered above a void of shifting light. Upon it rested the artifact, newly recovered, barely catalogued, and already dismissed. It was a slab of dark alloy, smooth except for the markings carved across its surface. The symbols were angular, deliberate, arranged in sequences that stretched from one edge to the other. No curves. No ornamentation. Just sharp, repeating forms etched with mechanical precision. Around it, scholars gathered. They did not lean in. They did not touch. They observed through projections, layers of interpretation rendered by the archive's systems. The artifact itself was almost secondary to the data hovering above it. Non-informational, one of the projections stated, its voice calm and absolute. Pattern lacks semantic structure. Classification, decorative or ritualistic. A murmur of agreement followed. Archivist Zyrel then stood at the forefront, his elongated form outlined by a faint shimmer of bioluminescent patterns along his skin. His gaze moved not across the artifact, but through the data, reading summaries, probabilities, conclusions already reached. Another relic of aesthetic redundancy, Zyrel said. Catalog it under cultural expression and proceed. A few scholars signaled acknowledgement. The matter, it seemed, was concluded. At the edge of the chamber, Dr. Elias Varn remained still. He had not activated a projection. While others studied the artifact through layers of abstraction, Elias looked at it directly. No overlays. No filters. Just the slab and its markings. Something about the symbols held his attention, not their shape, but their placement. They repeated. Not randomly. Not symmetrically. Purposefully. Elias stepped forward. I'd like to request a closer examination, he said. The room shifted, not physically, but socially. Attention turned, mild curiosity mixed with faint amusement. Zyrel regarded him. On what basis? Elias hesitated only briefly. The repetition isn't decorative. It's structured. A scholar nearby emitted a soft clicking sound, laughter, by their species standard. Repetition is the foundation of ornamentation. Not like this, Elias replied. He gestured toward the slab. The intervals vary. The sequences extend. It's not mirroring, it's progression. Another voice interjected. The systems have already analyzed positional variance. No informational pattern detected. Elias nodded. What parameters were used? A pause. Standard interpretive frameworks, the voice answered. Which assume semantic encoding, Elias said quietly. Now Zyrel's attention sharpened. Are you suggesting the systems are insufficient? He asked. I'm suggesting they may not be looking for the right kind of structure. The chamber fell silent for a moment, not in shock, but in mild disbelief. The idea wasn't offensive. It was simply outdated. Zyrel folded his hands behind his back. Clarify. Elias stepped closer to the platform. For the first time, he reached out, not to touch the artifact, but to trace the air just above its surface. These symbols repeat in clusters, he said. But the clusters change length. That suggests sequence, not decoration. Or variation within a motif, another scholar countered. Motifs don't escalate, Elias replied. A flicker of irritation passed through the group. Not hostility, just impatience. Zyrel studied him for a long moment, then said, And your conclusion? Elias exhaled slowly. I don't have one yet. That answer, more than anything else, drew quiet amusement. You challenge the archive's conclusions without presenting your own? Zyrel asked. I'm questioning the method, not the result. A few scholars turned away, already losing interest. Cyril considered this, then inclined his head slightly. Very well, Dr. Varn. You may conduct an independent analysis. There was a subtle shift in tone, permission granted, but framed as indulgence. Manual methods, I assume? Cyril added. Elias met his gaze. Yes. A faint ripple of laughter moved through the chamber. Primitive, someone murmured. Cyril did not smile, but there was something close to it in his voice. Proceed. I'm curious to see what your perspective yields. Elias worked alone. The archive provided him with a private chamber, quiet, isolated, free from the constant hum of shared analysis. The artifact rested at its center, unchanged, unremarkable to anyone who did not look closely. Elias did. He began with replication. Not scanning. Not digitizing. Drawing. Each symbol, each sequence, transferred by hand onto a physical surface. The process was slow, deliberate. His hand moved steadily, mapping not just shapes but positions, spacing, relationships. Hours passed. Then more. Patterns began to emerge, not fully formed, but persistent. Certain symbols appeared more frequently than others. Some always followed specific sequences. Others marked boundaries, ends of clusters, beginnings of new ones. Elias paused, studying the growing network of sketches spread before him. They're not random, he murmured. He marked a sequence, 3 symbols, repeating at irregular intervals. Then another, 5 symbols, longer, more complex. A thought formed, tentative but insistent. He stood and activated a minimal interface, just enough to access basic reference data. Not interpretation. Not analysis. Just information. Numbers. He didn't input the symbols directly. Instead, he mapped their positions, frequency, spacing, recurrence. The alignment wasn't immediate. It resisted him, slipping just out of reach. Elias leaned back, closing his eyes briefly. Start simpler, he said to himself. He returned to the sketches and isolated the smallest repeating unit. 3 symbols. He assigned them provisional values, 1, 2, 3. Arbitrary, but necessary. Then he traced their occurrences across the artifact. The pattern shifted. Not perfectly. Not cleanly. But enough. Elias's eyes narrowed. No, he said softly. Not arbitrary. He erased the assignments and started again, this time focusing on frequency. One symbol appeared more often than the others. Another appeared rarely. He reassigned values. Then he extended the sequence. Elias froze. He checked again, cross-referencing positions. The intervals matched. Not exactly, but consistently enough to suggest intention. A slow realization settled in. They're counting, he said. Not decoration. Not ritual. Sequence. Elias stood abruptly and gathered his notes. He needed confirmation, challenge even. Something beyond his own perspective. The next cycle, he returned to the main chamber. The artifact remained where it had been, largely ignored now, just another entry in the archive's endless catalog. A few scholars lingered, engaged in unrelated discussions. Elias approached them. I need to ask something, he said. They turned, mildly attentive. How do your systems define quantity? He asked. A pause. One of them responded. Through relational scaling and comparative indexing. Elias frowned slightly. Define one. Another pause, longer this time. It is a unit of reference, the scholar said. Reference to what? The answer did not come immediately. Elias nodded slowly. Do you understand the reference, or does the system? A flicker of discomfort passed through the group. You're asking irrelevant questions, one of them said. Am I? Elias set his notes down and activated a simple projection, his sketches, nothing more. These symbols, he said, pointing to a sequence, increase in length. Not randomly. Systematically. A scholar glanced at it. We've seen the patterns. They lack semantic encoding. They're not encoding meaning, Elias said. They're building it. That drew a few more eyes. Elias highlighted the sequence again. 3 units. Then 5. Then 7. And? Elias met their gaze. They're prime intervals. Silence. Not disbelief this time. Confusion. What is a prime? One of them asked. Elias blinked. For a moment he said nothing. Then, quietly, he answered, a number divisible only by itself and 1. The chamber stilled. No one laughed. Elias gestured to the artifact. They're not just repeating, he said. They're counting. Elias returned to his chamber the next cycle, carrying a renewed sense of purpose. The patterns he had glimpsed the day before refused to leave his mind. Prime numbers were just the beginning. He could feel it, layer upon layer of structure hidden within the symbols, waiting for someone willing to reconstruct it step by step. He laid out the sketches across the table. Each mark, each line, each subtle variation, seemed to pulse under his gaze. He assigned numeric placeholders to the sequences, this time using a more systematic method: frequency, adjacency, and interval length. The repetition that once seemed chaotic now hinted at a language, a mathematical language. He began testing hypotheses. One sequence corresponded to 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Another, overlapping yet distinct, seemed to track ratios. Elias scribbled, erased, recalculated, and mapped again. Hours became cycles, but he did not notice. He had entered a rhythm, a dialogue between his intuition and the artifact's logic. Then, for the first time, he noticed it, a recurring pattern that mirrored known mathematical constants. Not exactly, they were approximations, but close enough to suggest intentional encoding. His pulse quickened. Whoever had created this, he thought, had wanted any intelligent observer to recognize universal truths. He had to test it beyond his own understanding. He needed the archive to engage with it, even if reluctantly. Elias entered the main hall, notes in hand. The slab remained on its platform, largely ignored now. Some scholars were discussing linguistics. Others monitored distant star systems. The chamber hummed, indifferent. I've completed an initial mapping of the sequences, Elias announced, projecting his sketches in simple form. The symbols were translated into numeric values, carefully labeled. Zyrel turned, his gaze assessing. Show us. Elias highlighted the first sequence, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Prime intervals. Notice the placement. Each repetition is intentional, not decorative. A murmur rippled through the scholars. One stepped forward. Prime numbers? How primitive. Elias ignored the jab. Primitive to some, universal to all. They exist independently of species, culture, or technology. Zyrel's tone sharpened. And you claim this is information, not ornamentation. Yes, Elias said simply. Patterns convey meaning. Repetition alone does not negate significance. A few scholars leaned in, curiosity creeping over skepticism. The prime sequence was simple, but Elias's next demonstration was subtler. He displayed overlapping sequences, showing how clusters aligned with ratios, one segment to the next, forming a structure reminiscent of basic geometry. The symbols are teaching, Elias said. Not ceremonial, not decorative. They are instructional, designed to communicate concepts universally. Counting ratios, perhaps even prediction. Zyrel's bioluminescent patterns flickered. Prediction? You are stretching the artifact's purpose. Not stretching. Observing, Elias replied. Notice this repetition, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. Then observe the overlapping sequences. They define intervals, not arbitrarily, but in a way that mirrors cyclical phenomena. Compare this to your stellar data. A pause. One scholar hesitated. You're suggesting these sequences correlate with actual astronomical patterns? Yes, Elias said. Orbital distances, energy emissions, cycle intervals. The artifact encodes measurable reality. The room shifted, subtly. The idea was radical. Humbling. A simple sequence of symbols, ignored for millennia, could describe the universe. Cyril spoke, measured but tense. If what you claim is true, why abandon such methods? Our AI systems render predictions with far greater precision than manual interpretation. Elias leaned forward. Precision is meaningless without understanding. Systems approximate. This artifact encodes exactitude, exact enough to predict events, not just model them. A flicker of skepticism remained in the group, but Elias pressed on. He had decoded more of the sequence. Numbers extended beyond primes, ratios, multipliers, cumulative counts. He overlaid the data onto a model of the star orbiting the archive. He traced the intervals with a stylus. Each alignment confirmed his hypothesis. Look here. The sequences correspond to fluctuations in energy output. This isn't random, it's a warning. Cyril's projected interface glimmered with uncertainty. A warning? You mean a star instability? Yes, Elias said, calm but insistent. A precise prediction embedded within symbols. Some civilization long extinct, left this knowledge deliberately. They anticipated intelligent observers. And they encoded the mathematics needed to interpret it. The chamber grew quiet. Scholars shifted uneasily. For the first time, AI predictions alone were insufficient. They had no experiential reference. They had not remembered how to reason. One scholar, younger and hesitant, finally asked, "But how did they know our star?" "This is speculative." Elias smiled faintly. "They didn't need to. The numbers are universal. A star behaves according to physics, not species. Observation and mathematics suffice." Cyril's patterns flickered with tension. "And your calculations align with current observations?" Elias tapped his tablet. "So far, yes. Small deviations exist, but they are consistent with the intervals described in the artifact. We are approaching a critical threshold." "Critical?" Cyril's voice held the faintest edge of alarm. Elias nodded. "If ignored, the consequences are predictable. The star's energy cycle could destabilize orbiting bodies. We may not have much time." The room erupted in murmurs. Some scholars protested reliance on manual mapping. Others argued the AI's simulations had already ruled out instability. Elias ignored the debate. Action required comprehension, not argument. He returned to the artifact, tracing symbol clusters again, this time mapping them directly to measured energy cycles of the star. Each number now had context. Prime intervals, ratios, cumulative sums, they all corresponded to observable phenomena. The artifact was no longer a relic. It was a key. A quiet tension settled over the chamber. Scholars who had once mocked him now watched, hesitant, recognizing a growing possibility. Elias was correct. The artifact was deliberate. The universe had been encoded in symbols they had long dismissed. Elias raised a hand, projecting the final overlay. "See here," he said. "The sequences describe the star's periodic energy surges. Timing, magnitude, intervals. Ignoring this risks catastrophe. This knowledge is active, not archival." Cyril did not speak for a long moment. Then, softly, "You are suggesting that understanding numbers, the most basic abstraction, prevents destruction." "Yes," Elias said. "Not understanding alone. Applying them. Recognizing intention." The chamber remained silent. Finally, a low hum of acknowledgement rippled through the scholars. They had seen the logic, even if unwilling to admit it aloud. The artifact was no longer decoration. It was instruction. And the instruction was urgent. Elias returned to his desk, methodical. The sequences extended infinitely, or at least as far as the slab could encode. Each layer unveiled new relationships, previously invisible. Ratios became patterns. Patterns became intervals. Intervals became prediction. Hours passed unnoticed. By the time he looked up, the light of the star outside had shifted, subtle but measurable, a real-time echo of the calculations he had been following on paper. The artifact had begun to speak. And Elias listened. He smiled faintly. They built this for anyone who could see, he whispered. Even one human. The chapter closed with him standing before the slab, tracing sequences once more. Counting. Measuring. Understanding. The numerical language had awakened, and with it, a quiet certainty. This was only the beginning. The anomalies began subtly. At first, the archive's instruments registered only faint fluctuations in the star's energy output, within normal margins, according to AI simulations. But Elias noticed them immediately. The variations matched the sequences he had mapped from the artifact. Not random. Not noise. Deliberate. He entered the main chamber, holding his calculations. Cyril was present, pacing before a bank of projection panels. The other scholars hovered nearby, some skeptical, some quietly curious. The star, Elias began, his tone clipped, is behaving exactly as the artifact predicted. Minor deviations, but consistent with the encoded intervals. We are nearing the critical phase. Cyril paused. Your intervals are approximations. AI projections show stability. Elias shook his head. Approximation is what the archive relies on. Observation is what the artifact relies on. And observation is proving correct. A low murmur ran through the chamber. Scholars exchanged glances. Cyril's luminous patterns flickered, a sign of agitation. For all his calm authority, he was confronted with knowledge beyond prediction. Explain, Cyril said finally, voice measured. Show the evidence. Elias projected the map sequences alongside real-time data. Symbols overlaid energy surges, primes aligning with spikes, ratios matching frequency cycles. The room went silent. The patterns were undeniable. This is a warning, Elias said, his hand resting on the projection. The artifact is not teaching abstract mathematics. It encodes prediction. The star's cycles culminate in a critical event, potentially destructive. Cyril absorbed the display, his gaze narrowing. And you believe we can act on this? Yes, Elias said. The sequences provide timing, magnitude, and interval. If we ignore them, we risk catastrophe. The younger scholar from yesterday hesitated. Could it truly be that precise? That ancient? That intentional? Elias did not answer immediately. He turned back to the artifact, tracing lines with his finger. Yes. Because mathematics is universal. Intelligence only interprets it. They didn't need our species. They only needed minds capable of seeing patterns. Cyril's voice softened, almost unconsciously. We've dismissed numbers as primitive, forgotten them, in favor of systems. And that is why we almost missed this, Elias said. Not because the knowledge failed, but because we stopped understanding the basics. For the first time, Cyril did not respond. He studied Elias's projections in silence, absorbing the weight of the revelation. The next hours passed in methodical urgency. Elias worked with a small team, translating the artifact's sequences into actionable models. Ships were recalibrated to orbiting trajectories, energy absorption patterns adjusted, evacuation protocols optimized. The archive's AI tried to override him, insisting the star would remain stable. Elias ignored it. He had mapped the numbers, he trusted them. The star's surface flickered visibly now, subtle pulses that matched the artifact's warnings. Instruments beeped alarms, but only faintly. Human perception had begun to anticipate the changes before machines could fully quantify them. Cyril approached Elias quietly. How certain are you? Within the sequence's precision, Elias replied. There's no ambiguity. The cycles converge on a moment of energy release. Cyril exhaled slowly, a gesture of resignation. And we rely on this? Yes, Elias said. Because the alternative is trusting systems that no longer understand fundamentals. Numbers do not lie. The first ships lifted from the archive, moving along calculated paths. Timing was critical. Every interval mattered. One miscalculation could leave vessels exposed to lethal energy spikes. Elias calculated margins of error, and aligned escape windows with sequences. Then, a low tremor shook the chamber. The star's energy surged slightly, just as the artifact had predicted. The AI systems registered it late, reporting stability. Elias ignored them. The numbers had already accounted for it. The pace accelerated. The sequence converged. Each interval tightened. Elias and the scholars monitored, recalculated, adjusted. Silence fell over the chamber, thick and tense. Outside, the star pulsed, bright and indifferent. Time was measured in sequences now, not clocks. Finally, the critical interval arrived. Elias's calculations predicted the first spike of catastrophic energy. The ships aligned perfectly. The evacuation was precise, mechanical, silent in its efficiency. Then it happened. The star erupted in a controlled, destructive pulse. Plasma waves surged, radiating outward, sweeping across space. Sensors screamed alarms. Yet the ships Elias had guided escaped unscathed. Every interval, every ratio, every prime number accounted for it. The archive survived. When the light and energy settled, Zyrel approached Elias. No words of reproach or apology, only acknowledgement. "You were right," he said simply. "We abandoned numbers because we thought we had surpassed them." Elias met his gaze. "You didn't surpass them. You forgot them." The room exhaled collectively, scholars staring at the artifact now with a reverence that had been absent for centuries. Not decoration. Not relic. A guide. A reminder. Elias returned to the artifact, touching its cool surface. The symbols seemed inert, but he felt their presence, their logic, their intention. "They built this for minds capable of understanding," he whispered. "Even if only one survives." Zyrel watched quietly. "Do you think others will remember?" "They will," Elias said carefully. "If they see numbers not as tools, but as universal truth. If they rebuild understanding from the ground up." A long silence followed, broken only by the faint hum of the archive, still pulsing with stored knowledge. Outside, the star's news cycle began, measured now by human comprehension. Elias gathered his notes. The artifact had taught him something fundamental. Survival depended not on tools, not on intelligence alone, but on understanding first principles. On remembering what had been forgotten. He looked at Zyrel. "The lesson is simple," he said. "Simplicity survives. Complexity dies if it forgets its roots." Zyrel inclined his head. "Then let us not forget." The chapter, and the story, closed with Elias recording his findings. The artifact rested silently on its platform, timeless. Its symbols were no longer senseless. They had been waiting for someone who could see. And for the first time in millennia, someone had. The stars outside shimmered, indifferent yet aligned, a universe now partially understood through numbers, and through the persistence of human perception.